What's happening, everybody? So sorry that this review and recap is getting posted late for episode 13 of season 2 of The Expanse, but I have a very good excuse. Last night, after the episode aired, my little brother and I recorded basically an hour-long season 2 recap and overall review of the books in the show to date, and that'll be getting posted to my podcast Wrong Reel on iTunes later today. If you want to follow Wrong Reel, the link is down below in the show notes. So while I would have loved to have done an immediate reaction video, I was unavoidably detained with other Expanse-related activity. But here we are, into season 2. Kind of a sad, bittersweet moment because we have to wait a year before we get more Expanse, unless you're planning on digging into the books, of which there are many. There are 6 great novels, along with various short stories and novellas. So there's no reason that the Expanse has to stop being a part of your life in the interim. But I guess now the big question is, what do we think of season 2 overall? How does it compare to season 1? Where do we think season 3 might be going? And as always, I'm going to hold off on making any comments that are spoilerific from the books until the very end of the video, and I'll warn you ahead of time because I know there are plenty of people out there who don't give a damn about the books and just want to enjoy the show on its own merits. I really enjoy doing the compare and contrast, whether you're talking comics and comic book movies, or Game of Thrones, the novels like Song of Ice and Fire versus the TV show. It's just interesting to compare how you tackle these giant stories for different mediums, because obviously when you've got a blank screen and a keyboard, you can write whatever you want. But when you're trying to adapt something to TV, especially with limited means, I mean, sci-fi doesn't have unlimited resources. Some things have to go, some things get to stay, some things get changed. And to what degree they're successful in that adaptation is part of the fun of following the show if you're a fan of the books. But I had an interesting thing happen on this channel last week. One of the writers on the show, Mark Fergus, responded to some of the concerns. People were having a conversation about some of the changes, and I thought it was pretty interesting. He made a comment. He said, "Don't worry too much, amigo. We love Caliban as much as you do." Caliban's War is the name of the second book. And basically episodes 6 through 13 of season 2 are all taken from that book. And I was all excited to see that he even noticed our conversation that was going on. And then he said, we'll consolidate where we have to. We would need 20 seasons to do the book's full justice, but I think we can do it without losing anything iconic or just plain awesome. So huge shout out to Mark Fergus. People who love this show are obviously very passionate about it and very protective of it and wanted to see it go for a very long time. And the people who love the show and the books are protective of the show, but also protective of the books and want to make sure that the show does the best job possible in adapting these books that they know and love. And I think overall, season 2 was largely successful. My favorite episode to date from either season is still episode 5 of season 2. Emotionally and intellectually, that just went to a really cool place in the world of sci-fi that's going to be very tough to top or match. But the good news is there are a lot of really epic killer scenes from the books that the show has not gotten to yet, where it has the potential to match those highs. But let's talk a little bit specifically about episode 13, which is called Caliban'S War, after the book. And the only thing I will say about the books before getting to the spoiler part at the end is that they are not finished with that book. There's still more of Caliban'S War to come. So it looks like they're going to do what they did with the first book, Leviathan Wakes, where the first season tackled like the first 2/3 of the book, and then the first 5 episodes of season 2 wrapped it up, and that's totally cool. And now that we know that's what they're doing, we can just enjoy the show on its own terms. The main thrust of this episode dealt with 2 fronts. One, you've got Christian, Avasarala, and Bobby aboard the ship, or the kind of private pleasure cruiser that is owned by Jules Pierre Mao, and their attempts to escape from it. And then you've also got the story of Holden and his crew realizing that this little monster is taking a nap down in their cargo bay. And what are they going to do about it? Because those things are powerful as fuck and really scary, and no one really knows what they're capable of. And that's one of the most tense parts of book 2. And so I was thrilled to see them tackling this predicament, because how do you get this thing off your ship without it either killing all of you, infecting all of you, or just eating and destroying your ship? It's a very real concern. And then on, with the Bobby and Christian storyline, basically how are you going to not have Avasarala get taken captive by this guy who clearly is happy to see the entire solar system burn if it means he's going to have a bigger, more impressive bank account. And at this point, Bobby's just had enough. She's done with diplomacy. She's done with politics. She's ready to put on her combat armor and put some knuckles in some people's faces. And that's what I've been waiting for with Bobby the entire season. So let's talk about Bobby's storyline first, because this was the one part of this overall season where I was a little disappointed that Bobby didn't get as many moments to shine in this season as I'd hoped. Because, as I've mentioned in previous videos, when her unit is attacked by the protomolecule creature on Ganymede, it's this really extraordinary, epic battle scene that we see through her perspective in the book, and then we also see it through her POV on her suit, because their suits record combat, and that becomes a huge part of her testimony. And I was just a little annoyed by the fact that she didn't stand up for herself more during her testimony, didn't put people in their place more, and didn't show the evidence that we all know that her suit possessed. So that was frustrating for me, and I just kept waiting, like, when's Bobby going to suit up and beat the shit out of some people? Because when she's got her suit on, apart from not being able to fly, she's basically Iron Man. I mean, she is, for the most part, bulletproof, and she's armed to the teeth and strong as hell and fast. And it's an incredible suit. It's an incredible exoskeleton that makes people, basically, I mean, in her own words, it makes her a fucking superhero. So I've been waiting the entire season to see her suit up and wreak some havoc. And even though we did get that this episode, there just wasn't a whole lot of her in action. And I totally get it. Having someone in a combat suit slamming people through walls, it's expensive to shoot. But it was just a little bit too little, too late. And it wasn't the world's most impressive fight scene. We get most of what happened with her storyline this episode was with Christian's assistant negotiating with Joel Paramal's mercenaries, trying to find their way out of their dire predicament. It just wasn't that interesting of a storyline. I would have preferred to have half the episode just focused on Bobby's POV, but maybe I'm just a little bit too in love with Bobby. But enough of that. What the show did really, really well this episode with the creature down in the cargo bay of the Rocinante, and how the hell are they going to get it out when it's really fast, really strong, and basically what it's trying to do is eat every available fuel source on the ship, even if that means the ship would just no longer function. Because that's what the protomolecule does. It finds fuel sources and radiation and organic matter and tries to incorporate it and put it to good use. I won't elaborate on what those uses are because that's a spoiler from way, way, way down the road. And Holden, Holden's fixated upon fighting the protomolecule, and he and Amos have this great fight scene where they try and take it on, and just it mops the floor with them, and Holden gets pinned up against the wall. And you have this situation where every solution for ejecting the thing through the cargo hold involves probably killing Holden as well. And will they be able to come up with a clever solution that gets rid of the creature but doesn't get rid of Holden? And that's where Prax finally gets a chance to shine, because Prax realizes that the protomolecule, much like a plant, and how a plant will grow toward solar energy in order to feed more, knows that they can essentially lure this creature toward a fuel source. And so they basically convert this little nuclear weapon into basically a little fuel cell that they can chuck off into space, have it go after it, and then just turn the ship around and blast it with the engines. It's kind of a great Alien-esque moment from the end of the first Alien, where it gets fried in the exhaust. But in terms of just overall beautiful shots and great special effects, it's definitely one of the most visually spectacular scenes from the entire season. But this is spoiler territory for the show, because this is something that's specific to the show and not from the books. Naomi finally does confess to Holden that she was so worried about Mars having the protomolecule and Earth having the protomolecule and the Belters having no weapon with which to defend themselves, but she also worried she was going to die on Ganymede, that she went ahead and sent a message to Fred Johnson, the butcher of Anderson Station, to where she had hidden the protomolecule sample that she told Holden she had shot into the sun, but had failed to do so. It's a little lie. And so now Fred has the protomolecule. So it's one of those situations where it's kind of like in our own Cold War in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, where everybody had the bomb, and if anybody lost their temper or sneezed, then the whole world was going to go bye-bye. And now we have a situation like that in the show where if anybody freaks out, the whole solar system could go bye-bye, because if the protomolecule gets loose on Ceres Station or Mars or Earth, it's not going to be good. And as we see a little taste on Venus, where the protomolecule is loose, when this ship tries to go down and investigate what's going on, in one of the most visually spectacular shots of the season to date, the ship just gets completely, utterly dismantled into a million pieces. And for a brief shining moment, all the scientists and military guys are like, what? But they're totally in shock. But that's what the protomolecule does. If there's technology or organic matter nearby that it can use, it's going to suck it up, put it to good use. So more to come on that in season 3. Or if you just can't wait any longer, book 2 will tell you all that you want to know. So I am going to get into some spoiler territory now from the second book, Caliban'S War. So if you don't want to hear that, bail out. But thank you so much for watching. But I think it's interesting that they decided to keep some of the best material from Caliban'S War for season 3. For me, some of my favorite stuff ever from the series. I've only read through book 3 and then the novella, The Churn. So I'm basically at the exact halfway mark. But the battle with Protogen, the subsequent battle in space when Holden is trying to retrieve all the information on where the protomolecule creatures are being fired, and then what happens on Venus as the protomolecule finally makes its ambitions known, all that stuff is truly extraordinary. And it's going to be a huge payoff to see that stuff probably roughly at the halfway mark in season 3, because we're going to get Bobby versus the monster and getting to redeem herself. That should be killer. I mean, the scene where Holden goes aboard Joel Piramal's ship trying to get that information when it's already infected with the protomolecule, and we see that even like the protomolecule zombies have evolved and gotten smarter. I mean, that's just gripping, fascinating sci-fi. And then seeing the protomolecule, I mean, this is a huge spoiler territory, but seeing the protomolecule rise from the surface of Venus at the end of book 2 and like almost like a squid go flying off into space. It's a part of the book that I read it and I read it again and I read it again. I just kept rereading the scene over and over again because it just was evoking such incredible imagery and exciting my imagination in such a way that I just couldn't help myself. I was totally fascinated. So we've got some awesome stuff to look forward to. At the very least, season 3 will take us into that. Just how far this show will go, who knows? I mean, are they going to adapt all the books? Are they going to skip some of the books? Are they going to skip huge chunks of the book? I mean, there's a lot of material. And who knows? I imagine right now their goal is probably to get to the end of book 3, since that really is a huge stopping point if you wanted to stop it there. But we'll see. Fingers crossed the show becomes a massive success for sci-fi and that it runs for another 5, 6, 7, 8 years and making all of us sci-fi dorks really, really happy. So let's, in the next year, spread the word, get everybody to start watching it, because if people start downloading the fuck out of the show and watching it and streaming it between now and next year, sci-fi with confidence can go ahead and greenlight seasons 4 and 5, which I know would make all of us happy. So hope you've enjoyed this season-long review and series of recaps. I really appreciate you watching it. I really appreciate all the comments below. I love talking with all my fellow Expanse fanatics. And yeah, I'm going to be reviewing other shows. Sadly, I don't have any other sci-fi to review in the short term. But if you have any recommendations for a great sci-fi, just let me know in the comments below. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it.